For today's video, we'll be talking about mirrors, something we're relatively used to. We see them all the time and pass them without a second thought. But have you ever walked past a mirror and thought for a split second you saw something that wasn't there? Something that may not or should not have been reflected? Or have you ever walked past a mirror and felt like someone other than yourself was in the reflection? Well, we're going to touch on that tonight. Let's get into the mystery of the mirrors. Before we go into this, I would like to ask you, have you ever looked in the mirror and thought for a second that possibly you heard something, or even in your mind? The question is, even though you know you're looking at you, are you really? What could it be that's communicating with you, giving you either thoughts of doubt or vain thoughts? Could it be that the mirror is actually holding a spirit that's trying to communicate? And now for this one, I think you might want to shut off the lights and close the door to your nearest mirror. We're going to get into some of the history and what mirrors do. Sit down and enjoy. Now, I myself am not the biggest fan of mirrors, though used in everyday life. But once you start to study the history behind them, you can kind of figure out why. As far back as it goes, even Romans believed that you could trap souls and cause bad luck to those who own it. If a mirror wasn't cared for properly, then it could allow bad things to happen. Now, let's go ahead and talk about that for just a second. Growing up, I was always taught, kind of as a superstition that I still believe today, you never buy a used mirror. That was one of the biggest rules in my family. Also, whenever you move into a new house or apartment, take the mirrors down and put your own up. Why is this? Because you never know what those mirrors have seen and what energy they could trap. I know that may sound a little crazy, but we're going to dig into that. So I want you to listen to some of the customs from around the world and see if it sounds so crazy after hearing them. Now, we have to look at the importance of reflections. Now, these things date back. Mirrors have been symbols of death, and superstitions have their origins. But the first mirrors were pools of water or streams in ancient Greek and Romans. Well, that's how they told the future. Later, they created small, heavy handheld mirrors from copper and bronze. Now, you got to think about that. They're looking into a reflection of themselves to see the future. But the Romans, they believed that every person goes through a 7-year cycle. That's why you hear if you break a mirror, it's bad luck for 7 years. But they believed it deeper than that. They believed that broken mirrors would bring bad luck to the physical being and the soul internally. Now, the beliefs about mirrors as soul portraits persisted through medieval times, and actually they still do today. As beliefs and superstitions spread from the Romans to other parts of Europe, deep beliefs about meanings of mirrors did too. They carried along. The modern mirrors found today, they were originated in Germany around 1835. But with the clearer reflections, the more fear that the souls lingered in those mirrors. So mirrors have been around historically since Greek and Roman times. But ultimately, the better the reflection, the more damaging it was to the soul. And certain communities around the world believe that ghosts could carry away souls through mirrors. Only problem was, many of them wouldn't know they were dead. They would think they were still living in this world when they were dragged off to the mirror world. And others believed that the deceased could harm the living by entering the physical world through mirrors. In the Talmud, a Jewish religious text, the shadim or soul can enter through reflective surfaces. Now just think about that. Let's take a trip over to Ireland to see what they have to say. The custom of covering mirrors is especially common amongst the Irish Catholics. The Irish wake is a well-known funeral tradition where the family of the deceased covers all mirrors in the home to hide the physical body from the soul. The family turns the mirrors and faces the wall. And some Irish superstitions say that if you look in the mirror long enough, you'll see the devil looking over your shoulder. And others believe that if they come in contact, the mirrors will trap the soul of the deceased, forever being placed in that mirror. On All Saints Day, it's believed that you should cover all mirrors. It's become essential because they believe that the boundary between the living and the dead thins, and the spiritual realm is awakened. These spirits can pass through mirrors into different locations, so therefore it's essential on All Saints Day to cover your mirrors. In some Jewish traditions, the custom of sitting Shiva is a week-long mourning period. It begins with covering all reflective objects in the house: mirrors, televisions, reflective surfaces like plates. Not only does this encourage inner stillness to meditate on the deceased, but it's a sign that all intimate relations in the home should halt. Instead of mirrors, the ancient Talmud text mentions beds. According to the Babylonian Talmud, the text that covers law and tradition, the bed was the most important part of the home. The bed creates life, so when death happens, it must be overturned to show the end of life. For this reason, people begin to reverse their mirrors. Today, they cover them completely during sitting Shiva. While some funeral customs differ among Asian countries, the respect is essential for all funerals. Most people in Asia follow a very specific funeral arrangements, or they risk bad luck. Covering objects in the home is essentially important to honor the deceased spirit. In Sri Lanka, a predominantly Buddhist country, places value on the deceased spirit. Sri Lankan Buddhists take special measures to take care of the deceased. They overturn any object that the spirit might see their own reflection, like mirrors or pictures, dishes. Some Buddhists believe that the spirit becomes confused after seeing its own reflection. When confused, it won't be able to pass on into the next life. In China, funerals are so important that some families often tumble into debt over high funeral costs. The family's honor is especially important. The Chinese cover mirrors to protect their loved ones. They believe if a person sees the coffin's reflection, there will be an additional death in the family. They are profoundly superstitious and follow customs like spreading rice around the home to lead the hungry ghosts astray. Even kings and queens were fond of mirrors. Queen Elizabeth, magician and head alchemist, was famous for scrying or telling the future from mirrors. Later, it was said that witches use mirrors as tools to perform spells. Mirrors hold very strong superstition that survived even into modern times. Now, why is that? Now, even Nostradamus had got his premonitions from what they say was a black mirror. Many people have used mirrors to see into the future, and today they still do use reflective surfaces. Now, when I say mirror, I don't necessarily mean just manufactured mirrors. I'll get into one of my own personal experiences later on, but for right now, let's continue on some of these superstitions. Does the name Narcissus ring a bell? Well, it should. From the old stories, he was one who became so beholden by the vision of his own face and the surface of the water that he himself died of thirst, not to disturb his own reflection. Talk about a narcissist. Now, if you're a fan of horror movies, and even if you're not, we've all ran into that one movie that shows what the person seeing in the mirror is not actually what's happening. So they'll be staring in the mirror and see something in the reflection, turn around and it's not there. Ghosts, ghouls, goblins, spirits, shadows, many different things appear in those mirrors. It ultimately makes you wonder, what is on the other side of the reflection? Do we not know? Something to think about. I was reading an interesting article, and it read, "Have you ever seen a puppy look at its reflection for the first time? It usually barks out of fear or confusion, like it's unnatural. Though we're now used to seeing ourselves, it can still be strange. In fact, there's a phobia known as iasoptrophobia, which refers to an extreme fear of seeing your own reflection in the mirror. And another phobia, spectrophobia, is the fear of seeing ghosts. Now combine these with the amount of fear of seeing ghosts in a mirror, and if you ever see shadows dancing across a mirror, and ask yourself, is it something? Did something just move out of the corner of my eye? What is that over there? You can probably understand why this is so unsettling for many people who have these fears. Mirrors show us ourselves. Sometimes it may be different than what we really are supposed to see, and they show what's behind us. So what if there's something there, something that we can't see because our visions are limiting us? What if we're not alone? Mirrors conjure up essential thoughts and fears. In fact, it's quite hard to talk about mirrors without spiraling into a physiological realm. Suddenly your sentences are tumbling and twirling down a hallway when all you were trying to do was explain what you saw. Mirrors can also distort perception, and we all know what that leads to. Now, even Feng Shui practitioners believe in the power of mirrors. While reading an article, I stumbled across this. Where in the bedroom would mirrors be avoided? Experts often warn that care should be taken when using the mirror in the bedroom because of its powerful qualities. In fact, some believe that mirrors in bedrooms may be responsible for a poor quality of sleep and nightmares due to their ability to activate energy. In Feng Shui, mirrors represent the element of water. They reflect and amplify energy, so avoid positioning opposite of the bed for good quality of sleep. If you have a mirror facing your bed and suffer from trouble sleeping, try covering it overnight to see if there's any improvement. If so, consider moving the mirror in another room. Likewise, it is not advised to hang mirrors over your bed, as the weight can disturb your sleep and energies. What's more, it is vital to avoid broken or cracked mirrors for the bedroom mirror Feng Shui. Broken, unrepaired items are thought to contribute to negative Feng Shui energy and even block positive energy in the space. Finally, avoid hanging a mirror facing a bedroom window. Feng Shui practices believe that the mirror's reflection quality can draw negative energy from the outside into the home and trap it within the house. With the bedroom being a place of escape and relaxation, it's best to keep the outdoors out, including the spirits. This is why it is often considered not okay to place a bed under any window in the practice of Feng Shui. We all look back at the old movies, especially vampire movies when they had no reflection. Do you wonder why that is? Well, I'll tell you. The reason why vampires traditionally have no reflection and didn't show up in film is the old mirrors used silver backing to achieve reflection, and black and white film was used with silver nitrates to capture an image. Since vampires were considered unholy, their light is not picked up by divine silver. Of course, silver nitrates was phased out, even in film. So, it was made obsolete by digital cameras, and modern mirrors are backed with aluminum. So once again, you have to ask, how can you sense evil if it's no longer backed by silver, and our digital cameras might be able to pick it up? So the old mirror and vampire trick doesn't work anymore. Neither does viewing them through a camera, with a lack of silver nitrates. So, how do you know who you're really in the presence of? Or was that their plan to phase out using silver to be able to hide themselves? We'll never know. Now, as stated earlier, I'll share one of my experiences, as this video has gone on a little longer than I would have wanted, but bear with me. In this story, it didn't start off as a dark and stormy night like other horror stories do. Actually, it was a relatively bright and sunny day. We had got a mirror. Unfortunately, it was a hand-me-down, but it was from my family, so I didn't see anything wrong with it. We had a family member pass away, so therefore some of their stuff was being given away. This specific mirror was relatively new, so there were no fears behind it. At least that's what I thought. As I began to walk past the mirror, I noticed that something wasn't very right with it. Things didn't look the way they should. Looked a little different. I'm not going to say this mirror had any form of special powers or anything like that, but something just wasn't right, and you could feel it in the pit of your stomach. Even those who weren't familiar with the mirror's past, they felt it in their stomach. It wasn't an old mirror. It wasn't anything that would make you feel different or uneasy. It was just we had no idea what the mirror had seen. A couple weeks went by, and I kept feeling more and more uneasy about the mirror, but I couldn't figure out why and couldn't pinpoint it. No one could. While walking upstairs, my daughter, being 3 years old at the time, she would go into the room and she would start talking to someone. And she was having full-length conversations. Me being me, I was like, okay, this can't be anything but an imaginary friend. Was I wrong, though? As days went by, my daughter would frequent the room more and more. She began to talk to the mirror even more frequently, laughing and chuckling and sharing conversation, almost like she was joking with the mirror and the mirror was communicating back. So this began to terrify me because of my superstitions. So I did what anybody would do. I sat by the door and listened to the conversation, and the things that she would repeat back were things she never should have known. Eventually, she mentioned my grandfather's name, someone who she had never known due to the fact he had passed 25 years before she was born. She began to tell me about friends I had and people I grew up with. She even knew the elementary school I went to. And when I asked her who was she talking to, she told me she couldn't tell because they wouldn't give her the name. Now, by this point, I'd gotten fed up with the mirror. Actually, to be honest with you, I was scared. Now, I couldn't put my finger on it and didn't know what to do with it because I was scared if I threw it away and broke it, then ultimately whatever was in it would be released. But on the other hand, I didn't just want to give it away to somebody, and whatever was there would be dealing with them or their children. So by this point, I really had no idea what to do, so I took the mirror, put it in a closet, and locked it inside a spare room. Nothing could happen. My daughter couldn't get in there. She would be safe, and I wouldn't have to deal with the mirror. Or once again, at least I thought. A couple weeks go by, and things are pretty much back to normal. But something still wasn't right. As I pass by the room, I can hear my daughter talking again, and this time I couldn't figure out what was going on. The locked room that I had the key to, the door was unlocked, which could only be done from the inside or with the key. The room door was cracked. The mirror was back in its original place, and my daughter was sitting on the floor talking to it with her dolls. At this point, terror went through my body, and I asked how she got in there. And she said the door opened for her because her friend wanted to talk to her. So I called a couple of my family members. I said, whoever wants the mirror, come take it, but I'm going to give you a heads up. There's something wrong with this mirror. It was weird because everyone had known something was wrong with that mirror, and the fact that it was supposed to be left in the house, no one was warned, and the person who brought it into my house also didn't warn me. So that was a very unfortunate circumstance. So the person who brought it to my house came, wrapped up the mirror, took it out, and it was gone. And I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking everything was over, it's finally done. A few weeks had passed and everything was back to normal. My daughter was no longer going and talking to the mirror. Nothing was happening. Everything was good. House was peaceful again, but I still felt uneasy. And I couldn't shake it. It was probably from the experience that I had, and just things just still didn't feel right. I remember it like it was yesterday. I just got done shaving my face and I was washing off what was left and cleaning up my face to get the hair off. And I went down and splashed my face with water, and when I rose back up to look at the mirror, whatever it was didn't have a wet face. Water was dripping down mine, but there was nothing dripping from it. So like anybody else, I splashed water on my face and I tried to, think it was anything different. And I looked back up and once again, nothing had changed. So that night I locked the bathroom, told my kids they weren't allowed to go in there. We left the house. I made sure we all left the house. We stayed out for that night. I came back the next day, took down all the mirrors in the house, and I put them face to face. So it was reflective side to reflective side, and I taped them together and then wrapped them in blankets and then put them in a closet to make sure that nothing would ever happen. I went and bought all new stuff. We went and bought all new mirrors just to make sure that would never occur again. To this day, I still don't know where those mirrors are. Some people aren't superstitious, so, I don't pass them upon them. But hopefully when they made it to the junkyard, wherever they went. And that's my story. And believe me, I will never forget it. I know I'm not the only one with mirror incidents and stories. Please feel free to drop them in the comment section. You don't have to make them too long or lengthy, and believe me, I will go through them and I will read them. Me personally, I'm very interested in the phenomena, but I would never want to experience again. That was something that probably left an everlasting scar. This is Legends and Folklore signing out. And as always, remember to have a wonderful evening, sleep tight, shut out the light, and close the door to any mirrors that are in your house tonight.